in, Billiken fans. It's Arch Baron Cup week, and we've got a great show for you. I'm Zach Miller, and I'm joined by Peter Hale on the Midtown Madness podcast. Pete, we got a hell of a show lined up.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've got Sully on. We're talking Arch Baron Cup. We're talking Dayton. We're 48 hours from now, I will either be just leaving UD Arena, or I will be at home angry that I did not get to go up to Dayton. So I guess we'll know soon enough.
Yeah, I think I fired off a really overzealous text to you earlier today. I'm like, what if I did go up to Dayton, and then about 5 minutes later, everything came crashing down to earth, and I realized that it's just not practical.
Someday.
Yeah, no, soon. I think, like I told Sully, if there were no postponements, I would for sure be considering it over about 75%. But before we get to Sully, and we're gonna kick it over to Sully eventually for a little Dayton preview. Hopefully, it's worth that we did it. Uh, but we got some men's basketball to talk about. We got a game in. Um, and the game went exactly how we predicted on our Iona preview last episode, right, Pete?
Yeah, we were all over this one. It was long in the works. The Ford Pitino reunion. Been hyping it up for weeks now.
Uh, it was, you know what? This was fun. This was this was the most fun I might have had at Chaffetz with the um, with the crowd under 5,000. Um,
Yeah, I
it was a
mean, it
good
was a
time.
good crowd given the short notice. I thought it was a really good crowd. At least it
Yeah,
came off pretty well on TV.
yeah, the crowd did its job in the final 5 minutes. It came to
Yeah,
life where I was sitting in 108. We had a few pockets of young fans, which I like, my age and a little bit younger, fresh alumni, which is always good. I think at one point the officiating got to me a little too much, and
mm.
I think I apologized to everybody right before I yelled a profanity.
Well, I mean, you're
I
not
just
the
go,
only
guys.
one.
I go, guys. I'm sorry about this, and then I just had to let it fly because I mean the officiating. I don't. Do you think the officiating was a byproduct of like having to pull this game together in 2 days?
I don't know. I don't know. I used to, back when I was a manager and at all of these games and in person, and I'd be around the officials and stuff. I kind of knew who some of them were, and I haven't paid attention to like who's who and officiating at all. So I don't know if this was like a D level replacement crew. It was weird that they called it really loose in the first half, and then I guess talked in their little halftime locker room and decided to tighten it up in the second half. And a lot of nonsense ensued. I mean, there was already a little nonsense in the first half, but of a different variety. But yeah, I mean, that typically is how it goes when they call it too loose in the first half. Is they overcompensate in the second, and it got to be pretty frustrating.
As we kind of joked about, this game actually came about really quickly. Um, Talk to us about the timeline about how this all came about. It happened within about you know a half hour to an hour. It seemed like.
So we were supposed to be going up to St. Bonaventure this weekend. We luckily didn't spend too much time on a preview last time around. And we're supposed to play Bonaventure mid-afternoon on Saturday. We were going to fly up there on Friday, and then I guess Friday morning we find out that it's canceled. And wait, was that Friday? No, it's Thursday night.
Yeah, it was postponed.
Oh, yeah, sorry, postponed. Yeah, so they're going to
Right after
attempt
they
to.
got out of practice, I think. No, it was the
Okay,
practice right before they were going to get on a flight, I think.
so okay, all right. I'm already so thrown off,
Oh,
but
yeah, right.
coaching staff immediately decides they want a replacement game. They know they have allowance for one more non-conference game because Drake, which was supposed to happen in Las Vegas on the 22nd of December, was canceled and not rescheduled. So they did have room for another non-conference game. They've already got makeup dates for the two previous conference games that have been postponed. Not don't have one yet for Bonaventure, but anyway. Um, they start looking for teams and who's got open dates on Saturday. And a lot of other teams around the country are in the same circumstance, looking for an opponent as a replacement. We talked to Arizona. They wanted us to come there. I don't know if SLU just wanted a home game or not. I mean, I know they wanted a home game, but I don't know if they were inflexible. But regardless, it didn't happen with Arizona. I think South Florida they had talked to a little bit, and that fell through. They even talked to Drake, and once Evansville had a cancellation of their game, Drake was forced to prioritize that in conference game. And then SLU, speaking of an in conference game, talked to St. Joe's, but there was a blizzard in Philly, and St. Joe's couldn't get out,
Hawks
which is,
won't fly.
that's right. But completely understandable circumstances there. So then early on Friday around noon, we start to get a little bit buzz that something's in the work. Now, by this point, Frank and Rammer deserve a lot of credit because they started as soon as they saw Iona was available, they start banging the drum for them immediately. And then other guys, in SLU Twitter, Earl, Carter Chapley, West Pine Bills, they all start retweeting like, hey, we really like this, it's Pitino, it's a reunion. And so Ford around noontime on Friday tweets like, hey, we've got something exciting coming. And then Stu leaks that it's probably going to be Iona, and it's in the works. And so finally it all comes together. We get the official tweet early afternoon on Friday that it's going to be Saturday at 7 St. Louis time. We're going to have Iona. And we come to find out later, SLU's going to play a return game next season. I don't know if we'll play at Iona or if it'll be one of those games that Iona plays elsewhere in the New York City region, in one of the NBA or NHL arenas there. So yeah, pretty exciting to see this come together. Iona's a really high quality squad, and came together so quickly. I mean, there are so many. I know people like to say, "Hey, like this team's free. This team's free. Let's make it happen." It's way more complicated than that. When you're already dealing with the fact that your schools, your cities, your states, your conferences might have different COVID protocols and rules about how to handle that. Now you're layering on travel logistics on short notice, not just flights or buses, but hotels, meals, everything else that comes with it. Um, you've got does this game even make sense for us? The quality of the opponent. Do we have room for another non-conference? I mean, there's so many considerations, not to mention that at the end of the day, the decision makers are people who are well-established coaches, and there's some ego, there's some bravado. But when you have guys like Ford and Patino who do have a different relationship, that part definitely gets cast aside. And it was just beautiful to see this come together.
Yeah, it was really nice to see it come together for the main reason obviously being well, the main, I guess, the main published reason being the Patino Ford connection and the reunion of sorts. But really, this was outstanding for both teams. This was a win-win as far as scheduling goes for both St. Louis and Iona. Iona, in that it's a really quality net rated opponent.
They were, I think, 47 in the net coming into this. SLU was right around that 70 mark. High 60s, low. I want to say we had crept into the 60s by the time the game was played. I know we after the last game we were at like 71 or something like that. So Iona was actually, a good deal ahead of SLU. Really quality team, 11-2 coming into this game, and their only losses were to Kansas and to Belmont. So really respectable. And then they had a win over Alabama, which is a top 10 team. This team, Patino's really upgraded the talent since he's been there. They've got transfers from Tulsa, SMU, Louisville, a few others. Just it's a really good team. And then from Iona's perspective, they get another road game against a quality net opponent. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it did make a lot of sense on paper, and not just because these were two coaches who know and respect each other and can make it happen.
Yeah, and they brought in a brand of basketball that we're pretty used to seeing, I think, in this one. Extremely defensive-minded, tight, aggressive man-to-man defense, and they really flexed it early in this one.
Man, I got flashbacks to playing Louisville in Conference USA so hard. I mean, Patino was there when I was at SLU. That was my sophomore year that we upset them when they were number 2 in the country. That was a really fun night, but most other times we saw Louisville in those years, it was not that result. And they're such a sound defensive team. They're such an aggressive defensive team. And the thing that I respect this, but I always hate to play against it. Patino immediately, as soon as the ball is tipped, his players are testing the limits of how this game is going to be officiated. They grab, they hack, they push, they get bodies on you, and kind of test how it's going to be called. And the way that this game was called was pretty loose in the first half. So there was a there was a lot not being called in the first half. I know it was driving SLU fans crazy. So be careful what you wish for, because then of course they tighten it up in the second half, and that was a mess too. But it really was. Um, if you're a fan of defensive basketball, then you're gonna really like Iona.
Yeah, I had a ton of fun at this game. I mean, it was a really really good game. The first 10 minutes were kind of brutal, but once the team started to settle into this one, it was a lot of fun. And the second half had that in spades.
Yeah, it was. So it seemed like the middle of the first, like it was. I know SLU was up 10-9 at one point, but then we kind of couldn't score for like the middle of the first half, and really it took kind of a run to close it out. And we were lucky to be down 1 at half, because Iona was up by like 12 at one point in the first half. It got really ugly there for a little bit. But yeah, the second half was great. The second half for a while anyway, before it got a little too bogged down with whistles. Second half was really even. It was really back and forth. It was played at a pretty good pace. So there was a lot to be frustrated about in this game that you could have called ugly. There wasn't great shooting. It wasn't uh, you know in terms of game flow and officiating, that was kind of frustrating. Um, but and didn't and kind of cut down on the flow. But it's weird that a game could be that aggravating and at the same time kind of a lot of fun. I mean, it's people are saying both about this game, and I honestly think both are pretty true.
I think a lot of the fun I had with this one was that it felt like uh, the personalities Iona had were easy to hate.
Mm,
I thought, Patino's obviously there. He's public enemy number one when it comes to, somebody who's going to get heckled. And there were, a handful of people around the arena. You could hear everything.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, yes, you could on TV too. You could hear
yes,
everything the coaches were saying.
yes. But I think the most unlikable character on the floor last night was Quinn Slazinski. Um, I hate this freaking guy. Like, he stinks. He's like, th- uh, he he's got that Cody Ellis factor, man. He really
There's
did.
there's a yeah, there's definitely a quality that guy has. It's almost like some of these guys know. They don't like they're almost like wrestling heels, like they're almost playing it up. Like this is the guy, he knows how to draw fouls. He went 8 for 8 from the free throw line. So he drew fouls, not always on calls that we agree with. And then he was constantly petitioning to the refs
Hmm.
on other calls. And that's just the kind of guy that you're just always going to hate, because like after every whistle you look and there he is, either chirping at players, chirping at fans, or like in his case, constantly going to the
Clapping.
refs. Yeah, I mean, he was. I can't tell you how many times he asked the refs to go review something when it wasn't. There would be like 18 minutes left in the half, and he's like, "Go look at the monitor." And you're like, that isn't a thing." Like, I don't know what you want here, man.
2:11 is left on the clock, and he's like,
Yeah,
"Run it back." I'm
right.
like, shut up.
It wasn't just him either. They had a few guys doing that, but it really was mostly him. But yeah, I totally see what you mean. He was not a, and then at the same time, he draws all those fouls. He's constantly protesting, and he only gets called for one foul. So yeah, he was just that dude.
Um, Talk to us about the finish of the game. It really was. I don't know if I ever felt. I don't know. Nervous was a feeling I had. It always felt like we were in control. We just had to do it. Um, but I think the 3 pointer from Iona uh, got people a little nervy.
Yeah, so it's tied at 64 with under a minute to play. And then Nesbitt, really physical drive and good finish, with 49 seconds puts us up two. So it's 66-64. And then Myers from Iona, he hits a three with 33 seconds left, and they go up one. And yeah, that was pretty deflating. But I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm like, 33 seconds is a really tricky amount of time on the clock, because um, you're down one, you don't have quite enough time. Like if it's 40 something seconds, I normally like a team to run down and go at the basket and try and make sure they're going to have multiple possessions left. 33 seconds is a little different. Um, but regardless, we wind up getting the ball in, and Thatch is like streaking at half court, and he's leading. He's got three Iona defenders behind him, and so you're thinking like, oh my god, easy money here. And he kind of, I don't know, I got to rewatch it because I
It
felt like he
was,
kind of hesitated.
it's weird because watching it live, it felt like he had all the space in the world and slowed down. But on TV, it honestly looked like just they the Iona defenders were even with him when he got the ball. So
Yeah,
they did. There wasn't a massive gap as it looked like live, but there was a little bit of a gap. But I don't think it was. I don't know. I think he made the right play. I wish he would have dunked it. Just dunk the damn thing.
well, yeah, and that's the question I have, is because when he got closer to the basket, it looked like he really slowed down and wasn't sure what he wanted to do. And by this time, he's got like three defenders closing on him. Regardless, he does not convert. Um, and so then they inbound the ball, and Nesbitt fouls Jolly immediately, and that's Nesbitt's fifth. So now he's out. Jolly goes down to the other end, misses both. So now Iona's still up one, 67-66. Yuri Collins has the ball, finds Jimerson at the top of the key. He dribbles downhill and misses the layup. And then who's there for the putback? But Red Thatch. And the putback was not just over an Iona defender, but Francis Okoro is reaching for that ball, not knowing that Fred is there over his left shoulder. So Thatch makes this putback layup as Okoro is trying to reach for the ball, and the Iona defenders underneath him. So it was a tougher putback than people realize. And so that's with like 8 seconds to play, which is a lot of time for Iona to get back down. And then Joyner has their attempt, which was way closer than I think people realize.
Yeah,
And Slew hangs on to win it by one.
I mentioned that to you this morning that I had to confess that
Yeah.
I thought. I mean, from where I was sitting in 108, like it didn't. I was like, oh, that's a miss. Yeah, like I was like, oh yeah, we like. I knew we won before the ball like hit the apex. But looking on TV, you guys had to be puckering hard.
Well, so yeah, so I guess that's the difference in perspective, right? Because you're at the end and we're at the side. And so there are going to be times when it looks good to you and not to us, and vice versa. And I guess that was one of those cases where on TV it was kind of like, uh-oh.
Yeah, not only did it, and I thought on TV it looked like a much better look than it
Yeah.
did in the arena because I thought it looked like an impossible shot. Like I thought we made it tough, but that was really piss poor defense.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were just so focused on not fouling.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of what happens when you wind up with those situations where 8 seconds is more than enough time to get down there and get a good look, whether it's at the rim or from three. And we're not only trying to get back, we're just trying not to foul. And that's often a recipe for disaster. So I mean, he misses that. They missed those two free throws. So it wasn't just Slew kind of making a big play. We did get some luck with Iona missing this. I mean, this game absolutely could have gone either way very, very easily.
I think Okoro got a lot of the headlines for having his best game as a Billiken, but I really think the most important player in this game. I mean, obviously, hitting the game-winning shot, it makes him a prime candidate for it. But Fred Thatch really kept us in the game early, or at least put us in a good position early, because we were absolute dog poop to start that game on offense, and luckily Fred was able to kind of use his physicality and his athleticism combined with his skill to put us in a lead. I think he had like 6 points. It was like 6-2. Fred with 6 and 2 for Iona.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. And I mean, with him, it's always defense. He's always leading with defense, but he did make some big plays there in the first half as well. Okoro, I'm looking at the his stat line, and he's 5 for 8 from the field, but man, it really felt like he missed a lot more than three shots. I guess all three of those were kind of like point blank at the rim. I didn't think he was 5 for 8. I thought he was a little worse than that. He actually, and this is an interesting one. He had our only missed free throw. He missed it badly, but this is a night where we went 25 of 26 from the free throw line, and we needed all 25 of those. That is a miracle of free throw shooting right there. I looked it up, and SLU has had 2 games where they shot, they don't list beyond these, but they went 18 for 18 and 16 for 16 in 2 games back in the 80s. But I don't know what our best game is of only missing one free throw, but this has to be up there. 25 of 26 is just incredible.
On the other side of the coin, the three-point shooting between both teams might have been the
Ugh,
worst in history um, between two teams.
yeah.
The Billikens go 3 for 14. Iona 4 for 22 for a grand total of, let me do the math in my head, carry the five, 7 of 36.
Yeah, so right around
So that
20%, a little below. That's pretty brutal. I don't have an explanation there. I guess Iona was coming off of a bit of a pause, and that's normally a formula for bad shooting. SLU, I was kind of hoping would look a little better than that, having already had that game back and then a week of practice after coming off of a bit of a longer pause than they expected. So I was hoping our shooting form would be back, but I think a lot of that from our perspective, a lot of that had to do with Iona's defense. Gibson Jimerson could not get a look from three. He just could not get free. And I know we've said this in other games where they're just being this season, they're just following him around his shadow. Well, not only that, in this game, I think was it Weaver or Joyner who was guarding him most of the night. I want to say it was Joyner. Yeah, Joyner, I think, had Jimerson. I think he was holding Jimerson's jersey for a total of about 4 minutes of the game if you were to like add it up consecutively. He had Jimerson like on a leash and a tight one. And there were there was one play late in the second half where I think it wasn't within the review, time, like just under 2 minutes. Jimerson goes up for a layup, and then the ball goes out of bounds. Iona says, "Go review it, go review it, go review it." Well, it was off of Jimerson, but only because they completely hacked his left arm. So even though it may have gone off his hand, it was just an obvious foul. So that I don't know. They wound up giving SLU the ball,
that's
regardless.
my favorite like basketball trope
Yes,
is that you either get the
yeah.
foul or the ball. What do you want?
Right. And so I think that was a lot of it. Jimerson did have 4 attempts. They were all kind of rushed. None of them were great looks. Iona really shut down the 3-point line for us. And I think that has a lot more to do with it. They had a few threes that I can remember that were just wide open that they just missed. So I think some of that might have to do with a little bit of rust on their end.
Yeah, it was, but all in all, it's a great win. we look at some of the standout performances. Obviously, talking about the free throw shooting. Um, I thought, Francis Okoro looked like a man in this game. Just completely out. He just imposed his will. I thought on the glass, and the Billikens did in general, out rebounding him 48-34.
Yeah, that was huge. And both teams had a ton of offensive rebounds. It was 21-17 slew in that department. And I know both coaches are outraged about giving up that many offensive boards. We did not handle the ball well, 19 turnovers, and Iona only had 9, which is excellent. So that was a little concerning. The other thing was Iona had 9 blocks. It felt more like 11 or 12. It was just I don't know. We've got to kind of learn how to head fake or just pass out of the when you I don't know when you get in trouble, give it up. We played right into their hands, and I know they block a decent amount of shots, but man, that was pretty frustrating to watch as well. So there were a few, kind of concerning aspects there.
Speaking of concerning, there was a moment, and I didn't see it, but apparently Travis was pretty hard on TJ
Hmm.
after a mistake, and ended up there was some action on Twitter too.
Was this late in the game or was this
So I think
because
well, I know that like TJ's dad was not too happy on Twitter about his son being pulled for a mistake, and then somebody makes the same mistake and they don't get pulled. I don't know. I don't really love getting into
Yeah,
that
I,
realm.
I, I love the Hargroves, love
Yes.
TJ. They're all, I mean, they're great people. I don't think it's a great idea to hop on social media right after a game, and see what people are saying. I don't know what good comes from it. Let people kind of vent, say their piece, get over it. TJ is going to work it out with Ford. It's not personal, whatever it is. And I don't think if there was any favoritism or whatever, I don't think anything like that would be the least bit intentional. I mean, he's a starter, a key piece of this program. He did make a couple bad decisions down the stretch. Tried to force it a couple times in 2 of our last possessions. Honestly, he was one of those big blocks where it was like TJ, don't even try that. And then he kind of rushed a shot on another possession. So not his best game, not his best decision making night, but he has had some other really good games. He was good on the glass. He was pretty solid defensively overall in this game. So not a horrible game, but certainly I think it was not entirely surprising if he and Ford did have I don't know. He made some plays where I could see a coach being pretty upset at him.
I think you talked about the turnover battle and how Iona did really well with 9 turnovers. The Billikens did well to capitalize on what little turnovers they had, because they scored 15 points off the 9 turnovers.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. That's about as good as you can hope for, I think. Uh, re-
Comparatively to 19 turnovers, and Iona only gets 20 points. So you're looking at
yeah,
2 points per turnover for the Billikens, or less than 2 points, but you get what I'm saying.
yeah,
And Iona has, they turn the Billikens over 90 times, and they only average about a point per
right.
turnover.
Yeah, Iona. I mean, it was just an incredibly inefficient night for them. They shot under 36% from the field, 18% from three. They seem to shoot early in the shot clock. I so which can always kind of create for kind of a little bit of a chaotic feel to the game. If they're forcing you to turn it over and then they're shooting right away. But regardless, yeah, I mean, I think we probably got this Iona team at kind of a favorable time, honestly. So even without Linson, even without a couple assistant coaches who were not on the bench,
I didn't even know
uh,
about that.
yeah, I think Forte. Hold on, let me think here. Was it Forte and
And
Giacoletti?
Giacoletti, I think, yes.
I think those two were said to not be on the bench. I wasn't looking very closely, but I could tell that there were people not. For whatever reason, the ESPN Plus feed last night for me was kind of fuzzy. It wasn't the
It
greatest picture.
was. No, you're right.
It was like not HD or something. But anyway, it was clearly a short bench, and we didn't have Linson. So regardless, I think we probably got kind of lucky in terms of when we ran into Iona. We didn't necessarily hit them at their peak this season. So I think that's another little element of luck in this game for us, and this is a really nice win.
Yeah, I was happy. I thought the game was a lot of fun, especially that second half, and the last about 5 minutes of the first half as well.
How was the rest of the in-game experience there? For something that came together so quickly, did it seem like everything was kind of staffed and open and running?
Um, I'm trying to remember. Didn't have a problem getting drinks. Um, they trotted out the fire. They did. They didn't have cheerleaders. No cheerleaders.
Oh, okay.
About a six-man band.
Yeah.
That was weird. It was very it was, but I mean overall they overcame it I thought and put on a decent a decent event.
Yeah.
Just very I don't know how the cheerleaders weren't there, but they weren't.
Yeah. And like you said, the crowd punched above their weight too.
Yeah, they definitely did. They were loud and especially late in the game. So
I guess you got to figure that the people who are going to show up with like 24 hours notice are going to be the ones who are like, the most excited to do it, and not, I know there were a lot of season ticket holders who didn't show or whatever. And I'm sure a lot of people already had plans or weren't able to come, or honestly, a lot of people are sick right now. So that's got to be playing part of a role too.
before we get over to the Dayton preview with Sully, let's go around the A10, what little we can, because games are just postponed and canceled left and right. Um, VCU knocks off Dayton 53-52. VCU wins it on an Ace Baldwin 3 with 6 seconds left, and this one was in Dayton.
Yeah, Dayton had a chance to win it at the free throw line. They went 2 of 4 in the closing possessions there, and then they didn't foul VCU, and Baldwin hit the three. So I think there's obviously some debate about how they handled that as well. We get into that a little bit with Sully though, but yeah, kind of a kind of a heartbreaker at home, and honestly, the low scoring affair you'd expect from VCU this season.
Davidson 88, St. Joe's 73. Richmond beats UMass 80-72. Rhode Island, George Mason, Duquesne GW, and Fordham Bonaventure all postponed. Saturday 1-8. Duquesne 78, UMass 74. Dayton 83, GW 58. And can we just trade Iona for GW for the rest of the season?
I would not be opposed to that at all. That would be a huge upgrade. I know Carter said this, Jamie on Christian, when he was hired there, really felt like the right guy. I guess where'd he come from? Siena, and really liked the way Siena played and thought he was a good hire at a challenging time for GW. But my God, are they bad? I don't understand it. I mean, they've got a few nice players. I know I said a couple weeks ago they don't really have a point guard, but man, oh man, they are bad.
Yeah, I just don't think that program has it. I think that's a school that's on its way out, along with LaSalle as far as Division One athletics goes. I think the only problem for GW is that they have a lot of those Olympic sports that they compete at a high level in, and they would have to drop those, and that's a
Yeah, they're
prestige
good
issue.
at soccer. They're good at a lot of those other ones. But yeah, they man, are they in rough shape right now?
Um, Davidson 72, Rhode Island 68. They escaped disaster. Um, VCU 85, LaSalle 66. Not surprising there. Postponed games: Richmond and Fordham, and George Mason and St. Joe's. Um, so yeah, that's around the A10. We're gonna kick it over to Sully right now. It's an awesome talk. Sully's a good buddy, and we always have a good time. So yeah, kicking over right now. All right, guys. It's I don't think I need to tell you what week it is, but I will anyway. It's Arch Baron Cup week, and it wouldn't be an Arch Baron Cup week without a little crossover between the Midtown Madness podcast and Talking Out Loud. That's why we have Sully, my good name, Dan Sullivan, joining us right now. Sully, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, fellas. It's a fantastic day for me as a Pittsburgh sports fan, but I'm going to turn that page. It's time to set this victory and my Steelers getting into the playoffs back into the past, put it in the history books because it's Arch Baron Cup week, and you can set the record straight 0-0. It doesn't matter what the records are going into the Arch Baron Cup. We all know that.
Well, I mean, you're just saying that because of the actual Dayton Flyers record. No,
yeah. I am. Yeah.
You know, we can talk about the Kansas win all we want, but in reality, it's been quite the roller coaster ride for Dayton. For maybe our listeners who don't like to watch Dayton, don't have time for such frivolity.
Nor should you.
Yeah, no. How would you recap Dayton so far this season?
I don't think I could really do it in like one word or even two words. I guess roller coaster is like the easiest moniker to put on it. And before we like jump into the show, if any Dayton listeners are here, I was supposed to have a show this week, so I'm very glad that you guys had me on because I put myself on the IR sipping hot water and lemon right now. So I'm hoping that I rebound before my normally scheduled show on Thursday. So I appreciate Billikens fans listening in, as do I Dayton Flyers fans. But I would say
really like your Ben Roethlisberger boot.
Yeah, exactly. The hot water and lemon is my boot right now. Podcasting is a serious business, as everybody knows. But the roller coaster is honestly how I would describe it. Like Dayton come to the gate, they lose 3 bye games to 3 terrible teams. They go to Orlando and they win 3 games that they frankly shouldn't have won. Like they beat Kansas, who was a top 5 team, still is in the top 10. And Kansas just took their first loss after the Dayton game last night, recording on Sunday. Like they took it on Saturday to Texas Tech, and they had rattled off, I guess, like 10 or 11 wins after that, which was hilarious to me. The Kansas's only loss of the season was the Dayton, right? And then you go even further. Last night I was watching Miami versus Duke, and I took a look at the Miami resume. Miami's only loss since losing to Dayton was Alabama. They've beaten Wake Forest, Syracuse, Penn State, Clemson, and then they go to Duke, and they beat Duke last night. So Dayton has 2 wins against those teams, right? Miami, who just won at Duke last night, and Kansas, who just lost their second game of the season. And then you look at the other games Dayton's lost, and you start to laugh. UMass Lowell, Lipscomb, Austin P. They lost all those games at home. And let me tell you, the Lipscomb game was never close. They lost to an SMU team who's like kind of mediocre. And then they lost to Mississippi, who's even more mediocre. And they went down to the wire with VCU at home the other night, and they lost that game too. So we're sitting here at 9-6. And I have to say that, like, if Billiken fans like want context as to like what's happening now in Dayton land, right when the non-conference season ended, it was ending at, I guess we played Southern. We were 8-5, right? And the local radio broadcast, who's like loosely affiliated with the school. I am not, which is why I like my show, because I can say what's actually true. They started to do the whole like, oh, well, the team's showing improvement, and I like where we're at right now. And I was like, that is a load of shit. We were 8-5 and we lost 3 bye games. Like, that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to St. Louis fans. It's unacceptable to Dayton fans. So I've been doing kind of like a lot of recalibrating, because you guys know when you're in these seasons, when you're like very out of average contention, each result does not matter that much. So you can have like a little bit more fun with the season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but you guys had to expect kind of an up and down season, right? I mean, like you're basically all freshmen. Your number 1 and 4 guys are not, but everybody else is. And I know some of that has to do with COVID. Some of these guys are classified as freshmen, probably wouldn't be otherwise, but you also did have a huge freshman class coming in. So I guess you had to expect with such a young team that there would be some ups and downs, maybe not 3 consecutive bye games at home, but there was going to be some inconsistency.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the funniest part about the season, is that people are like, well, this is a young team. Like, what do you expect? And I'm like, okay, what I expect is to win bye games at home in November to Austin P and Lipscomb, right? Because I just rattled off that resume for you guys, right? And let's say that everything else went to plan and they win their bye games to start the year. The bye games, like lowest level of expectation. Dayton would be sitting at 12-3 right now, and all of their losses would be inside the top 100. They would have like a very legitimate at-large resume with Belmont, who's top 50, Kansas, who's top 10, and then Miami, Florida, who is now going to be like right outside the rankings after beating Duke, if not in the rankings. So did I expect the season to be bumpy? Yes, but you can't help but look back right now at 8-6 and go, why didn't the coaching staff have these guys prepared to win their bye games at home to start the year? Which again, bare minimum expectation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what was it about that Kansas game? I'm sure Billiken fans are gonna, that's the one game that I think Billiken fans may have seen. And what did you and the rest of the Dayton fans see in that game that kind of brought it to the result that it did?
Like I've been trying to figure out how the hell we beat Kansas, like since the game happened, and even last night. I was watching Kansas Texas Tech, and I'm like, this is such higher level basketball than I've seen in the A10 this year. Like, yesterday I watched Dayton like absolutely blow the doors off of GW, and then I turned on Davidson, Rhode Island, and I remember when the UD GW game ended, I flipped on UConn and Seton Hall in the Big East. And I was like, this is one of those years when I watch Dayton and then I flip on one of these games in the Big East and I go, this is such higher level basketball than we're playing right now. It's like, it's so much more organized. It's just a better level. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about, but to answer your question, Dayton won the game against Kansas in one of the most unorthodox fashions I can ever remember. They turned the ball over 20 times. They were 5 for 17 from downtown, and they didn't even really play well. Like I remember in the second half of that game being like, we're not even playing well. Like, how are we in this game? They were down 15 at one point, and I can't even think about in my head, like, what were the things that they did to come back in that game. It was just, and I'll tell you this, I was watching that game at a friend's house, and I was like very loosely watching the game because when you lose 3 bye games, at that point we were like 3-3. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna like be locked into the result of this game. And then you guys know how when you're like passively watching something, and you're like, oh, we're getting a little bit closer, and then like 5 minutes pass by, and you're like, oh, now we're only down by 5, and then 5 minutes pass, and I was like, we're winning this game, and there's like 2 minutes left. It was one of those where you're like, how did we get here? I still really don't have a good answer to that, to be honest with you.
Well, let's talk about your last 2 games. I'm a little curious about a couple things. First off, GW. Consensus on A10 Twitter is that GW is just terrible.
Trash.
But there was a little debate over how well Dayton actually played in that game. What's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, you guys know as well as I do, just like watching the conference for all these years, that sometimes you get a game on a Saturday afternoon where the result's never in question and you never really have to like nitpick it a whole lot because you're like, this is going to be a W for us. Like St. Louis has been on top of the conference in enough years. You know exactly what I mean. You get out by like 10 points in the first 10 minutes and then it's just kind of cruise control, right? And that was how it felt against GW, was like, we finally got back to some normalcy, just getting out to a comfortable lead early and then just really not letting them back into the game. The key for Dayton this year, like win, lose, or draw, is going to be the 3-point shooting. And I don't mean like Dayton's going to live and die by the 3. What I mean is they're going to shoot a lot of 3s anyways. So the only way that they're really going to like outscore somebody or beat a team that's better than them is if they're hitting 3s. And that result was the same against GW. They were 8 for 16 from 3. If you go back and you look at the game against VCU, they were 3 for 15. That's the difference. They lost the game against VCU by 1 point. They absolutely blew the doors off George Washington. So I probably will say this a lot this year, but if you're a Billiken fan, you're wondering like, oh, why Dayton lose or why Dayton win that game? You could probably look at the 3-point shooting for just about any game moving forward, and it'll correlate to what the result is.
VCU's also, I mean, they happen to be the best defensive team in the conference, and I'm sure that
They're almost
probably
one
has,
of the best in the country.
yeah, right. So that, I mean, that has part of it, part to do with it. But in that game, I thought it was kind of an interesting finish. Dayton, I guess, had a chance. They shoot 4 free throws late there, hit 2 of them, and then decide not to foul. I saw some kind of debate over how they handled the end of that game as well.
Yeah, that's the biggest debate in Dayton fandom right now, is that I think by and large people are pretty happy with Anthony Grant, just the fact that like he's an alum and represents the program well and he recruits really well. But the biggest problem with him year in, year out is that end of game situations, he's just not an adept play caller. And here's what I mean to like explain this, because I have to explain it to people all the time. Anthony Grant obviously knows way more basketball than all of us combined, twice on Sunday. I've never said otherwise. But it's a lot like I equate it to myself when I'm playing flag football. Okay. Usually I know what I want to do in a given game. But when I get into the huddle as like a quarterback, you have to actually call the play. I'm terrible at that. Absolutely terrible. And I'm just thinking like from a mindset perspective, right? Because you have to take what you're looking at, and then in your mind, all the things that you have to apply it to the exact thing you're looking at that moment. To be fair, that's a really difficult thing to do. And that is not something that Anthony Grant has shown in his career that he's successful at. So although he knows basketball in, out, X's and O's better than any coach, I would take his X's and O's against anybody. When the game's on the line, he just doesn't seem to make the right decisions way more often than not. And now we kind of have a lot of data to look at to say in close games, he's a below average coach at best. So when I look back at the VCU game, it was just a lot of the same, right? Like we had 2 fouls to give. We didn't give them. We got the ball back on a rebound and 55 seconds left. One of our guards wasted 10 seconds before the bench called a timeout. And you might say to yourself, well, he didn't know and he wasted 10 seconds. Well, that's the problem. Our guys are consistently in end of game situations where they're not prepared to make the right decisions. And for as much as we always say like, oh, they're college kids, like don't be so hard on them. That's why the coaching staff's there, to make sure that they're prepared to make those decisions when the game is on the line. And that's been, 5 years running now, Anthony Grant's thing, because you guys think back to those games where we had really good teams, right? In that game that Jalen Crusher won at the buzzer in 2020, that wasn't because of a play Anthony Grant called. It was because Jalen Crutcher hit like a really ridiculous shot with 3 seconds left. It had nothing to do with the coaching staff. We just had enough talent to overcome those deficiencies. So where I'll end is like that part's becoming clear, is that like at Dayton, we're always going to need enough talent to overcome the end of game deficiencies by our coaching staff.
Looking at your guys' roster this year, it's a pretty young team. I'm thinking guys like, and it reminds me. Whenever I think of young teams, I always think of the Billikens. The year we had 4 players either suspended or expelled.
Oh yeah, I remember that year. That was a good time.
Yeah, thanks. Who on this roster? Well, I'll say this: what matchups are you looking forward to? And where do you think Dayton has the advantage in the game?
Yeah, I think it sucks to say it like this because it feels like I'm not giving credit to St. Louis, but it's not that. It's just I've seen this team, and like what I have to impose on St. Louis fans is that Dayton is not a great team, but they're not a bad team either. And so it almost matters more what Dayton does than what St. Louis throws at them, right? Because as Dayton fans, and as Anthony Grant knows, you guys kind of have your established brand of basketball now, right? Like Travis Ford usually knows kind of like, here's what the style is going to be. We're going to be physical. And now you guys are shooting free throws, which is dangerous. You guys are making free throws. That's big.
Just a reminder that the shot the Jalen Crutcher hit wouldn't have mattered if
how'd you make your free throws?
Could have shot free throws, yeah.
Yeah. I remember talking about that with you that night. But so what I mean to say is that like if Dayton's hitting threes and they're not turning the ball over, they're talented enough that they'll win against St. Louis. But Dayton turns the ball over in like 1 in 4 possessions right now. And they're a terrible bunch of shooters. Like they're way more likely to shoot 22% than they are 32%. So as far as the matchups go, like I know you guys are a little bit more guard heavy now. And so I think the tide has almost turned a little bit where when it was Dayton St. Louis, the blueprint was St. Louis has to bang down low and get as many 2-point buckets as they can. And Dayton's going to try and win it with guard play. I think it's kind of switched. Excuse me. See, I'm overcoming this injury. It's almost kind of switched where Dayton's now stronger in the front court and their backcourt is very weak and shaky, and you never know what you're going to get on a given night. So I think the keys to the game for Dayton are simple. If they win the points in the paint battle, they win the turnover battle, and they shoot over 33% from 3, Dayton's going to win the game. Now, what I will say to give you optimism is that us shooting over 33% and winning the turnover battle, that's a Vegas odds type of thing. That's like a 5 or 6 to 1 type of thing. So like I said, those are the keys to the game for me. Whether they get executed or not, that's anyone's guess.
I think I look at, I agree with that for the most part. I look at the front court here and I get a little scared. Your top 2 guys, Kamara and Holmes, are 6'8", 6'10". We have we kind of rotate 3 centers and really 2, Martin Linson and Francis Okoro. And then we'll bring in, a freshman in that 3rd spot, Traore. Linson is coming off an injury. I haven't heard 100% that he's going to play in this game. We thought we might have him for Iona and didn't. So we're hoping to have him back, but he's coming off an ankle injury that's been a couple weeks now. So I don't know. I kind of don't know where he's at. So I think you're right about the front court, and given Linson's injury, Traore's inexperience, I think that's kind of where Dayton can kind of make their money against us. That's what scares me the most. But Holmes is only a freshman at the same time. So as good as he is, I'm kind of wondering, is there kind of a weak point to his game? Does he get in foul trouble? Is he inefficient? I mean, what's his story?
Yeah. Of all the predictions that we made, most of them were wrong about the Dayton team. The one that we did really hit on was that Deron Holmes was going to be an impact player from the jump as a freshman. And for Billiken fans, he was a top 50 recruit. He was the highest rated recruit that we've ever got in Dayton's history, as far back as they have been ranking such things. But the weak point in his game is pretty obvious, and it's his offense. He hasn't really figured out who he is offensively. And I think back to Obi in his freshman year. Obi knew how to get really easy buckets all the time. And then that started to improve, and then his defense came along, and then he was the best player in the A-10. So Deron Holmes is going to be the opposite. His defense right now, like he's already playing like a top 10 defensive player in the league. And sorry, I say that because we haven't had a guy alter shots at the rim defensively like him in quite some time. And so if his offense comes along, like his defense, that's where his game's going to be elevated to the next level, because he's so disruptive on defense, and he does so many things for us, kind of protecting the paint. And he crashes the glass like effectively, and so does Kamara. So this year has been a little bit different for us because we haven't had a Dayton team that's been this effective at rebounding in like 20 years, legitimately 20 years. And it's really due to Holmes. So his offensive game has come along just a little bit at a time, just like freshmen do. But the weakness in his game is very obvious. And it's just that he's still kind of lost on offense. He travels with his footwork in the post. We don't have great guards that make effective entry passes more often than not. And that's the kind of stuff where I can look back and go, well, they're freshmen, they're young, they'll figure it out. Right.
All right, Sully, I'm gonna leave you with this one. Odds that this game actually gets played, and your final prediction.
Yeah, that was every game is kind of up in the air right now, right? Okay, so my prediction for the game is that it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to go back to like the 10 years ago Dayton St. Louis slugfest, because this team is going to be predicated on defense. Like we're going to get to a style in A10 play where we say, hey, you got to hold people under 60 because our offense just isn't that good. And like I said, our shooters really aren't that effective. So defense is going to have to be the brand of Dayton moving forward in conference play. So my prediction is that both teams stay under 70. I have a weird feeling about this. I woke up today kind of thinking that Dayton was going to squeak this one out, but I don't know how. Like I just said all these things like, oh, they turn the ball over a lot. They can't shoot. So I'll say that because we're on the road, St. Louis squeaks one out. And I'll say like it's going to be like a 2-point game. And since I didn't do my own show this week, I'm going to hit you guys with trivia. Okay. Since we joined the conference, we've had a lot of close games. How many games have Dayton and St. Louis taken to overtime since St. Louis joined the conference?
I actually looked this up last season and I can't remember.
Okay, so I know there was there was I can confidently say one at Dayton and one at SLU. I
At
know
least.
that. Obviously, thanks. I'm gonna say 7.
What do you think, Peter?
That was going to be my guess too, actually. I'll just say 8 just to take the over.
Well, there you go. You got the over. It's 8.
Okay.
We've taken 8 games to overtime since joining the conference, and 2 of those games have gone to double overtime. One at St. Louis and one at UD Arena. So
Wow.
That's how rivalries are born, gentlemen, right there.
I do have to correct you on one thing. You called it a road game. It's actually a home game for Dayton.
It is
on Tuesday. Yeah,
it is. My bad.
Okay, yeah. So I live in Cincinnati, so I plan on driving up for that. But like everything these days, it's going to be decided that day. The game's happening, I'm going. If it's not, I'm staying home. So hopefully,
we got screwed on the schedule this year too, because I'm sure you guys don't know this, but from the beginning of January when conference play started until March 1st, we literally play one Saturday home game. One. And so I don't know how the A10 decided that, but I'm not going to be at the Dayton game on Tuesday. I live in Chicago.
Right.
And but since we play at St. Louis on a Saturday, I will be at Chaffetz for that game in February. So that's how it works out sometimes.
That's what kind of, and I think it's a double-edged sword too when you're talking about a rivalry game like this, and whether it's on the weekend and whether it's better for Dayton fans Dayton as a team that the game is a weeknight at home versus say when SLU hosts on a weekend, more Dayton fans can make it down to St. Louis and maybe mitigate that advantage.
That's a really good point, man. I never thought of it like that, but you're right. Like St. Louis almost would be better served to have their game on a Wednesday, just like we are on Tuesday, because like most Dayton fans are gonna that want to travel will travel for a Saturday night game. So that's a good point. I never thought of it like that. Yeah.
If this was like if we were running down where no cancellations, no postponements, I would be up there. I would leave Monday night and I would go in for that Tuesday game. But it's just driving 6 hours and staying in the worst city in the Midwest, and maybe not seeing a game, maybe ending up at Buffalo Wild Wings right outside town.
Yep, got one of those.
That's not super appealing. Although sometimes I'm just in the mood for some average food, like.
Yeah, that's what you guys have on us. There's like a little bit more to do when you go to St. Louis for a weekend than there is to go to Dayton. Because if you go to Dayton for a weekend, you pretty much have to plan around just going to the game. That's what we got. So it is what it is.
You could do a little better. I go up there every year, so I know a few spots, Zach. Whenever you come into town, or you too, Sully, I can now that we're all grown up and not hanging out at campus bars, we can do a little better than that.
Speak for yourself. I don't mind hanging out at the campus bar.
I don't put it past me.
Pre-pandemic, actually right before the pandemic, when I went with some friends, we wound up staying at a campus bar way too late, and a bunch of mid 30-something dudes kind of embarrassing themselves that night. It was a rough ride home the next morning. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I do plenty of that, but it's on the radio, so I understand, man.
Well, Sully, thanks for joining us. Bummer to hear you won't have a show this week, but not that I listen anyway. But
Yeah, I know. It's not your bag. Dayton fans. It's for Dayton fans. That's my niche, you know. I think I'll be back off the IR by the time I have a regularly scheduled show on Thursday. So I'm hoping to do the rapid reaction after the game. And you know, best of luck to you fellas. The Arch Baron Cup brings out the best in all of us.
should we do some Twitter space before the game?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be
Really
around.
space it up. All
Right
right.
here, right here in the home office, the Talking Out Loud Studios in Chicago, Illinois. Yep.
All right, Sully. Thanks for coming on, man. We'll talk. We'll talk Tuesday night.
All right, fellas. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Again, thanks to Sully for joining us. That's at Sully, my good name on Twitter. And then I believe the podcast he does is Talking Out Loud, and I think it's Talking Out LOWD on Twitter. So go follow him, and you can keep up with what Dayton's doing, at least for the purposes of academia. Because God knows we wouldn't get any pleasure from watching Dayton otherwise. But yeah, he's great at what he does. Actually, does some of his show for the radio affiliate up there. I think it's the ESPN affiliate. The Billikens, you know, they got Dayton on Tuesday. Whether that played, we don't know. Scheduled to play Fordham at home Saturday, this coming Saturday. Again, not much we can really talk about because we have no idea if this game's going to happen.
Fordham's better, like we've talked about, than they have been in years, and probably in about 5 years. But they will have. They'll be coming off a fairly long stretch of not playing much at all. So I got to think that's if that game happens, we're going to be pretty heavily expected to win that one.
Absolutely. Women's basketball, not a lot to talk about, Pete.
No, unfortunately, a couple days ago, late last week, around Thursday or so, we kind of got word that they were off COVID pause, and it sounded like they were going to be playing this weekend. But now, unfortunately, they're back on pause, and it looks like it's due to issues within their program. So they already had that the game on January 5th, or Wednesday, at Fordham postponed to be rescheduled, and now the game that they were supposed to have on Sunday, today as we record this, yesterday as you listen probably, that one's postponed as well. So we expected to be talking about that game tonight, and unfortunately we don't. The good news is they don't play again. They're not scheduled to play again until they go to Dayton on Sunday the 16th. So they're lucky to have that week break off, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're healthy by Wednesday or Thursday if the league tries to squeeze in a makeup game in there, which actually might make sense. So stay tuned. Obviously if they do get a makeup game squeezed in there, we don't know what it is yet, so we can't preview it, but we'll try and draw people's attention to it if it pops up.
Moving on to men's soccer, massive news came down the pipeline Monday. I had heard things, here and there that the Billikens were going to lose 8 players to the draft and graduation. That came to fruition, including some massive signings to Generation Adidas.
Yeah, that's so Generation Adidas, for those who might not know, this is it's kind of a special program that Adidas and MLS kind of set up as a joint venture to bridge the gap for guys who are early entry from college, right? So there's normally 5 to 10 every year, guys who want to jump to the pros early. It's not something you can do, like it's a little more complicated than in other sports. You can't just declare early. So you have to sign a contract with Generation Adidas, and then your contract will transfer to a team in the league after they draft you. So it's a little complicated, but Patrick Schulte, Isaiah Parker, and Kip Keller all signed those contracts to enter the draft early. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's big news. There's 8 guys who did it this year, and 3 of them are from SLU.
Yeah, that's it's incredible. We knew Isaiah Parker was elite, but I did not truly expect him to sign a pro contract and go. Although there were rumblings and that some. I mean, there's big names that have signed Generation Adidas contracts.
Oh yeah. I mean, like just recently you've got guys like Daryl Dike, Tajon Buchanan, who's Canadian. Both of those guys recently signed new contracts over in Europe. Frankie Amaya, who was a number one pick out of UCLA a couple of years ago. Miles Robinson, who's been great for the men's national team recently. Another guy who's been great for the national team recently, Walker Zimmerman, signed with Generation Adidas back in 2013. The SLU players that have done it, Brad Davis did it back when I was at SLU in 2002, and then Will John and Tim Ward did it right after I graduated, 2005. So both of those guys left early as well. So SLU's got a little history with it, but it's been a while. So it's pretty cool. And we also know that Simon Betcher is not going to return. He could have had a fifth year, due to COVID, but decided to go pro. And but he's not Generation Adidas because he's already academically a senior and he's old enough and everything.
Yeah, the Super Draft will be Tuesday, 1/11 at 1:30 p.m. St. Louis time. We'll obviously keep updated with that throughout the day on Tuesday. Talk to us about a mock draft was released from Top Drawer Soccer.
Yeah.
I feel like whenever we talk about mock drafts on this podcast, that it's like an NBA mock draft, but for once we're talking about like an MLS draft. So I don't know. I wish I knew more about the way the MLS draft works. Last time that I paid attention to it was Alex Sweeten's draft year. I believe he was taken by the Union in like the third or fourth round. I don't remember. The mock draft was pretty promising for the Billikens.
So I won't get into all of the minutia of MLS draft rules. They're a lot more complicated. If you're used to like the NBA and NFL drafts, they're a lot more complicated than that. And it's also not quite comparable to NHL or MLB, where you might not see the players drafted for a few years as they kind of come up through a farm system. It's just a different animal altogether. So we won't get into all that. But Top Drawer Soccer, which is kind of as one of their writers, Travis Clark, said on Carter Chapley's podcast, Billiken Babble, not to advertise for one of our competitors here, but he described them as kind of like a rivals, but for soccer. And their mock draft had 4 Billikens in the top 15, all in the first round, including number 1, Kip Keller. If he indeed goes number 1, and everything I'm seeing is that he's a top 3 pick, he would go to Charlotte, which is the expansion team. The same mock draft also had Parker at number 4 going to Houston. It had Schulte at number 6 going to Dallas, and it had Betcher at number 15 going to New York Red Bulls. It's extremely rare to see this many first rounders from one college team. Pretty crazy, actually. And that's all in the first round. I think there are 3 rounds of the draft, and you never know. You might wind up seeing another SLU player go later, but from everything I'm reading, those 4 guys are pretty much guaranteed first rounders. And the order will probably change a little bit, but it's pretty amazing to see that level coming out of SLU. And now, Zach, I gotta wonder, was this Elite 8 run this season a big letdown given how much talent there is in the program? That's not a serious question at all.
No, it's a fair question. Now, I know you're not being serious, but like at the same time, it's kind of frustrating. You hear, you think about when the Washington coach said that they hadn't played anybody quite like Washington, and you're like, sir, like
Yeah.
we have 4 first rounders. I feel like could have done better. I think the letdown is more or less um, the draw. I think the draw was the big letdown
Yeah.
in that.
It certainly makes this season a lot more understandable. I think coming into this season, not a lot of people realized how much talent SLU had or how good they were. I think that probably the coaching staff, having talked to Coach Kalish, I think he knew how good they were going to be, um, or at least how good they had a chance to be. But I don't think people realized it was quite like this. I mean, there were a lot of points in the season where like, for instance, Parker touches the ball and you go, okay, wow, that's a different level of skill. Like I saw that guy and I knew he wasn't going to get SLU for 4 years.
Right.
I knew somebody like Batcher was find a professional home somewhere because of his goal scoring knack. We knew Schulte was a high level keeper, and you've been banging the drum for Kip Keller all season long. I mean, I think he's your MVP. The way you've talked about him. So certainly we knew these were guys who were pros eventually. I just don't think we all thought we would have thought those are 4 mid-high first rounders this year, all 4 of them. Like that's wild to think about in hindsight.
Absolutely. I think yeah, Charlotte is got has a huge chance to take Keller there because that's a guy you can build your defense around. A young piece that maybe not ready to go right away. I think he is, but just with how last man defending, how huge he was at that. He's going to be the tent pole for an expansion team that's probably going to struggle as most expansion teams do. So I think he's got an excellent opportunity to be the guy on defense for a new team. So I'm excited. I'm hoping I'll be watching a ton of MLS this season, I guess. If all of these guys end up playing right away.
Yeah. I mean, if we've got this many guys around the league, yeah, it certainly raises the level of interest for sure.
I'm gonna need to find some money somewhere in the couch cushions for some new jerseys, to go along with it because I'm sure I'll get if he goes number 1, I'm sure I'll get a Charlotte Keller jersey for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, you know, this team's amazing. Mujib Marana, Houston, Chandler Vaughn, DC United, Sternberg, New York, or no, sorry, the New England Revolution, and Wilkinson, Calvert, and Leith was Sporting Kansas City. So all those guys are homegrown, and those could be gone right away as well. John Klein is going to come back. That'll be a huge piece of the puzzle to keep. But Kalish, Stoll, and Birch are going to have a hell of a time trying to reload next season.
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, you've also got Palazzolo, who is a 5th-year senior, so he doesn't have the option to return. I don't know if Klein, I don't know how it works necessarily, whether you have to declare for the draft or not. Like, I think
I declare bankruptcy.
I think the way that on Chapley's podcast, the way that Travis Clark made it sound was that Klein may or may not, like he said he was going to come back. But I think if he starts to get the indication like, hey, we're going to take you in the 2nd or 3rd round or something, he could go. So it sounds like they have the option. But don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure. But the point is, it's not just those top 4 guys. We might see a handful of other guys leave. It's not to say that they all will, but that they all can. And so I would expect SLU's starting lineup to look a lot different next year. A lot was said about SLU's depth this season. Stu wrote about it. Kalish talked about it with us a little bit. He was very big on having the ability to play 10v10 in very serious high level scrimmages to get this team ready for this season. So I think he has very much a next man up mentality. I think he feels like even if I lose 8 or 9 guys this week to the MLS or wherever else they sign, he feels like he's got guys waiting in the wings ready to go, not to mention more talent coming in. So I think the program will be all right. I would not bank on us going undefeated into the NCAA tournament again next year, losing this much, but if we're going to be the Kentucky of college soccer, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, I I would be too, man. I believe Mujib Marana is going to sign with Houston. That one I can tell you,
Yeah.
I remember specifically being told that. I think Wilkinson and Vaughn too, but I'm not positive on that. But that remains to be seen, and we're gonna find out a little bit more on 111. I know I'll be glued to. I'm sure it won't be on TV. I'm sure it'll be on the internet, which is kind of a bummer. Uh, but let's talk a little baseball. I think we need a little reflection on what was an incredible 45 minutes an hour with Darren Hendrickson the other night.
Yeah, I finally just listened to that episode today, and I that was a really good talk. And one of the things that he basically told us, I mean, he basically ran down the entire schedule with us. He said they hadn't released it yet at the time because they still had paperwork to come in from one school. But sure enough, on the 4th, they put out the whole spring baseball schedule, and it's a nice schedule. It's good to see. Like, he ran through it, but now it's nice to see the whole thing laid out and made official. So we start off with that 3-game series against Bowling Green in Hoover, Alabama. He really likes playing there. That'll be February 18th. They've got a 3-game series at Oral Roberts in February, and then they go to Illinois State for a series in late March. In March, we've got home series against Northern Colorado, Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Austin P. Conference play opens with a series at Fordham on April 1st. And then we've got a number of one-off games sprinkled throughout the season, road games at Mizzou, SIUE, SIUC, Northwestern, Missouri State, SEMO, and then some home games. SIUE comes, for a return game, plus Western Illinois, Rockhurst. So a few of those in there as well. So like he said, it's mostly a bus schedule because they do enough flying in conference. And he wanted to kind of have that protection, that flexibility, in case COVID continues to rear its head into the spring. So yeah, it's a schedule that he feels like they're going to be pretty competitive, and it gives him a lot of flexibility, and I think he's really happy with it.
Yeah, I'm excited for this. I'm hoping for some night games. I'm hoping maybe that Mizzou game would be an evening game on the 15th of March. That would be a really nice little quick jaunt down and back.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'll be cold as hell over in Edwardsville on the 22nd of February, but that would be a cool one to go check out as well. But I know you could hear the excitement in Hendo's voice when he talked about that Dayton series to finish off.
Yeah, he loved that. He indicated that there was no love lost between the teams, which I really love, because I think that's kind of shaping up. I know, we make sense as rivals in this conference, but it seems like that's not just happening in basketball, like it's happening across all sports. Is Dayton is turning into kind of this nasty rival in pretty much everything. I know it's happened in women's soccer, men's soccer to a lesser extent, and yeah, baseball here too. And yeah, so that one will be May 19th to the 21st. And I just checked the schedule. There are no times or anything up yet. It's still pretty early. Season doesn't start until the 18th of February. And, they don't come home until early March. So, yeah, but it's a nice schedule. And hopefully, I think that sounds like the team will be pretty good this year after a couple of challenging seasons.
Yeah, I think he has, like he said, I think he stated the pieces are there. He thinks,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping he's right on there. So yeah, I think that's about it for the week that was in Billiken athletics. Anything you'd like to add before we drop our social channels and head out?
The only note I want to add, just to kind of give an update on Jordan Goodwin, he had his cup of coffee in the NBA, and he's back down with the Capital City Go-Go, the G League affiliate for the Wizards now. His 10-day contract, that hardship contract, expired. He didn't end up playing in the last 3 games of it, so he played in 2 out of the 5. The last 3 all wound up being super close games. All were decided at the buzzer. 2 of them, Washington lost on crazy circus 3-point shots. and unfortunately, yeah, they were on the losing end 2 out of 3 times, but those were just not games where those guys, those 10-day call-ups were just not getting in those games. So unfortunately for Jordan, he didn't get much run this time, but he played in the NBA, and if that's it, no one can ever take that away from him, and that's awesome. But I have a feeling that's not the last we saw of him anyway. I think he's going to get more chances. So we'll keep you updated on one of our favorite all-time Bills as he continues his pro journey.
Absolutely. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Midtown Mad Pod, at Peter is a tweeter, at Zach Miller MMP, and make sure you're keeping up with us on Tuesday for the MLS Super Draft. Other than that, hopefully you make it to Dayton, and hopefully you bring home a winner. With that said, Arch Baron Cup Week, go Bills.
Go Bills.